What kind of physique can you achieve? Let's find out. Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Brett Maverick here. I hope you all are having an awesome day so far. So today we're going to be talking about your bodybuilding potential based on 3 factors: your genetics, your bone structure, and your muscle tie-ins. So let's talk about that. I feel like a lot of people have this skewed view of what they can achieve, you know. They see guys like Arnold and Steve Cook and Callum Von Moger and all these guys and think that they can achieve that same body naturally when it's just a fallacy. It's a fairy tale. You can't compare yourself to people like them. They do not have the same genetics and body structure that you have. No two bodies are the same. So your best bet really is to compare yourself to somebody with the same body type structure that you have, or better yet, compare yourself to yourself. But here's what you really need to know when you are trying to forecast what kind of body you really can potentially achieve. So one of the things that makes the biggest difference in how your muscles will appear are your muscle tie-ins. So there's high muscle tie-ins and low muscle tie-ins, and anything in between. Here's what I mean by that. Everybody knows that a tendon connects your muscle to your bone, and your muscle belly has an origin and an insertion. The origin is where your muscle starts, and the insertion is where the actual activity and motion takes place. For instance, the bicep, here's where it starts, right? But this doesn't really move. But down here, this would be the insertion because that's what actually moves. You can see it inching up on my upper arm as I flex. So your muscle insertions are gonna make the biggest difference in the way that your biceps, calves, and triceps appear. Let's take, for example, a high calf insertion. You see high calf insertions a lot in African American people, whereas you might see low calf insertions on, a lot of Asian people. And there's a reason behind that. It's actually an evolutionary trait. Much of Africa is a very low latitude, hot, dry climate. So it's actually an evolutionary adaptation to have long, thin extremities for cooling purposes. This is why Kenyan runners dominate the Olympics, because you can think of the leg like a pendulum. The more weight you have at the bottom of your leg, around your ankles, the heavier and the more energy it's gonna take to swing your leg forward. So the skinnier it is, the more effort and energy you're saving with each stride. This is why most NBA players actually have pretty small calves, because they're taller, slimmer, and thinner at their extremities. Now I want to talk about the way that it affects the way that your upper body and your arms look. So what a high insertion of your bicep looks like would be if your bicep ties in further up on your arm rather than closer to the elbow. Meaning, for instance, if you look at my bicep, there's about an inch and a half right there. A high insertion would come up higher and be more compact, whereas a low insertion would go even further towards my elbow and there would be less space here. So the best looking bodybuilders have actually right there in the middle. They don't have really high insertions or really low, because low insertions will spread out your bicep, making it have less of a peak, but a high insertion will make it compact and just look kind of strange. So if you're lucky and you probably know who you are, you probably know where you stand, then you have something right there in the middle. And if you actually look at my biceps, you can tell that they're not exactly symmetrical. And it also affects big time the way that your tricep looks. I'm just gonna use Connor Murphy as an example for a very high insertion of the tricep. You can see here in this picture that his tricep actually connects well behind his rear delt. There's not very much separation going on there. And I'm not trying to dig on him because I'm actually in the same boat. You can see that my tricep actually connects behind my rear delt as well. But just compared to somebody like Andre Iguodala on the Golden State Warriors, his tie-in is actually down here on his arm, much under his rear delt. People with this type of tie-in are really lucky because any amount of muscle that they put on is gonna look massive. It's gonna look really animated. It's gonna burst out of their arm and it's just gonna look really muscular. So if you're lucky, then you have a low tie-in of your tricep. So really the way that your muscle tie-ins appear really depends on genetic adaptation and your parents. It's the size of your muscle bellies as well as the length of your tendons. And there's not really much that you can do about it. Now let's talk about your chest. Chest depends a lot on your bone structure. Mainly your clavicles, your collarbone. If you have wide clavicles, it's gonna affect the way that your chest looks as well as the broadness of your shoulders. If you have wide clavicles, it's gonna make your pec muscles look like upside down down triangles. And if you have short clavicles, it's gonna make them look like right side up triangles. And if you have wide clavicles, they're also gonna make your shoulders look a lot more broad and masculine. Now, I genetically don't even have wide clavicles, but to make it even worse, I actually broke my collarbone on 2 separate occasions, so it actually fused shorter than it normally would be. So I don't know if you can tell, but this shoulder is actually in about 1.5 centimeters. That just goes to show the difference that just a little bit can make in the overall appearance of your physique. And then there's the width of your hips. This almost depends entirely on your genetics. You can lose as much weight, as much subcutaneous fat as you possibly want, but there is a plateau of how thin your waist can get. Like I mentioned before, a lot of African American people have that small, tight bone structure, so they really get that nice animated look. This is why you can sometimes find African American guys who have never even touched a weight, who have better, more ripped, more V-tapered physiques than dudes that have spent years in the gym, cause genetics. And people always ask me about why their abs are off-centered or imbalanced, right? And the only way I can explain that is it's genetics as well. It depends on the muscle belly size and the length of your tendons that your parents passed down to you. That's why some people just got lucky and have those, you know, brick wall abs, and some people have the freaking Windows logo. You know, there's nothing you can do about it but build that muscle up and lose subcutaneous fat to make it look as shredded as possible. Same thing goes for your quads. Some people suffer from high insertions of their quad muscles and they have a hard time building up that muscle towards the knee, you know, that teardrop muscle that comes up on their leg. But other people have low insertions and they find it really easy to build muscle down around their knee, but sometimes suffer being able to build it around their waist, you know, around their glutes. So guys, chances are if you're a taller guy, you're gonna have higher muscle insertions, and if you're shorter, you're gonna have lower muscle insertions. It can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the way that you look at it and depending on the genetic lottery, if you won it or lost it. Me, for example, I have really high calf insertions on my calves, so my calves are horrible, but I'm doing my best. But I also have pretty high insertions on my arms as well, so it makes my biceps look pretty decent. So I give and I take, you know, take a penny, leave a penny. That's how it works. So guys, really the reason for this whole video is I don't want you to compare yourself to anyone else who have these superior genetics, you know, the Simeon Pandas and the Jeff Sides, because chances are you probably don't have the same genetic structure as them. Chances are there's probably no one that has the exact same genetic structure as you. So you need to take a serious look at yourself in the mirror, decide what's possible, what kind of tie-ins, what kind of bone structure and genetics you really have, and how you can maximize each and every category of those. That's gonna do it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to make this as clear and concise as possible so you guys can get a good idea of what you guys can expect in your endeavors. So if you haven't already, subscribe, turn the post notifications on, and until next time, peace out.